Hello everyone and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 99. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, Don. How are you?
I'm good. Remember, the Pancake Parlay podcast is a pop culture podcast where we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, pretty much nearly every single week. And yeah, let's just dive straight into it. So basically what happened is, for the next gen consoles, we're just waiting for any information. I think, Microsoft has been pretty clear with their intent. Apparently, there's rumors that they might have a show in May and May and June to compensate for E3. But Sony has kind of been quiet on their side, aside from maybe showing their specs probably about like a month ago.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, everybody's kind of drip feeding whatever news that they can now, because at the moment, with everything that's happening in the world, people, everything's on pause. So we're only kind of getting news here and there about new things that are coming out, and that's the same for the show. We didn't do the last week's show because I don't know, I kind of felt like, I guess we felt like that there really wasn't much to talk about, and it would just be us like padding out like what's been happening. So I guess we're going to try and do like maybe like every 2 weeks or something like that. We'll see how things go, right? But one of the first pieces of news that kind of came out was the new PlayStation 5 wireless game controller called DualSense, which seems pretty interesting because I think there hasn't been a wireless controller that's come out by default, right? With the console.
For default.
Yeah, no, actually. Oh wait, yeah, there
No,
has been, right?
everything basically has. I think uh, since the
It's,
the
it's been so long.
360
It's been
era,
so long since I've had a console that like wireless like machine like
you're like wireless.
something.
Wireless. No
Oh
one wants
wow.
wireless.
Yeah. You see, my big thing about this controller is that it looks fucking ugly.
It does. I think the two tone is just not working well. Like I think,
Right?
like for
It's a
example,
little flat.
I
Oh,
think two tones can work. It just like the way it's designed does not look good.
oh, like that's my thing. A lot of people were saying like, oh well, I was reading online saying like, oh, people said like, the Cybertruck looked bad, or like those Nike shoes look bad. It was like, no, Cybertruck looks cool. Those Nike shoes look cool. This looks like ass. Um, I don't know what was happening when they decided to design this, but I guess it's like it is probably their attempt to do something different and futuristic, and PlayStation kind of has the upper hand in like the quote unquote console generation. And subsequently they can have like a bit of room to kind of play around with how they want to do things, especially since like even I think like uh the first Xbox One controller is very different to kind of the pro super duper ultra controller that's out now, right? And it's much better. I do like the newer pro controller. I actually have that I use for my PC when I do like, I don't know, gaming with my PC.
Yeah,
So
the pro controller, like I played once at like I think a PAX event, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, this feels just a hell of a lot better. Even like for example, like the new I think Xbox One controllers that do come out, they've got the things that they originally didn't have on the triggers, where they just have this grip to them. I'm like,
mhm.
oh, like it's just the little small thing. I'm like, man, that makes it so much better. Like it just feels better. Um,
Now, the thing I'm kind of confused about is like with this new PlayStation controller, it it doesn't have like like a concave kind of button like layout like I think the newer, like the current PlayStation 4 controllers have, like kind of match the kind of shape of your thumb, right? To be more ergonomic. It doesn't have that kind of feel. So I'm wondering, like, why they decide to go with that kind of choice for it. Because I thought they went in a pretty good direction with um the kind of previous controller. Like Xbox's controller, like, their triggers, kind of curve with your fingers. So it's just very strange, like why they decide to go with this. On top of the fact that the colors are very weird as well for this controller.
yeah,
But
I think everyone's just because the weird thing is like Sony has not really innovated so much in the controller. Like
mhm.
aside from like the PS1 days where they just had no joysticks to having joysticks, I mean thumbsticks, and then pretty much from like PS2 onwards to PlayStation 4, it's literally been the exact same looking controller, like only
Mhm.
with slight differences to it.
Mm.
And this one's the really big one where it kind of looks more like an Xbox type controller, which I think in general I think a lot of controllers will get to that point where it's like they're all kind of going to be the same, because even like the Switch Pro controller is pretty
Oh
much
yeah,
like an Xbox
pretty
Lite.
much. Yeah,
Because
yeah, basically.
yeah, so it's I think everyone's kind of like, okay, this is kind of probably the best way it probably feels in your hand, like even behind
Hmm.
your hands, how things feel. I think the only difference, and I think this is probably the only really debate as well that people are raging on, is just the how your sticks feel. Like I like the what is it, in inverted sticks, okay, the 360 controller, where the thumbstick, where you when you hold the controller, the thumb is the left thumbstick is
Thumb
up
is
top,
lower or
and
whatever.
the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
and the other ones, and the right ones on the bottom. Like for me, I feel
Hmm.
like that's better rather than like cramping it with the PlayStation controller. But
Hmm.
that's just me, and I think a lot of people, like, I don't know, it's just a preference
It's
thing,
a
I
preference.
guess.
Yeah, it's a preference thing. In the end, like whether it's more effective, like I'm not sure. Like again, like if you're gonna play something competitive, anyways, like you'd probably like want to flex, like make it all flexible and stuff. The one thing is, I'm pretty sure this controller, like I guess you'd know with PS4 controllers, that are wireless. Do they use AAA or AA batteries?
No, they don't. They come with
They have an internal
they come
battery.
with internal batteries, but and you know what I've heard, because I don't really play my PlayStation that much. I use my third party games on my Xbox One, but I've heard from
Hmm.
people who do play a lot of the PlayStation games that um the charge time isn't that great, and it
Okay.
and also I've heard some instances as well where like the controller basically dies and they have to get a new one, which kind of sucks.
Oh, okay, that does suck. Hopefully, that's something that they can fix. But that's the one thing I kind of like about the PlayStation controller is that they do have an internal battery rather than like you having to like take out double A's and charge it that way. Like it'd probably be a far more effective way for a controller from a pro consumer perspective to have an internal battery that's within your Xbox controller that you can take out if you need to replace it, but the internal battery stays in there, and then you can charge it using a cable so that it's basically a wired controller. But once it's charged enough, you can just take it off and play like like a wireless controller. Like Xbox currently doesn't have that
Well, no, no,
particular model.
that's the thing. They do, but like I think that their whole thing is choice. So like it when you buy a default Xbox One controller, it just comes
Mm.
with just like it's empty, so you can put like batteries in there if you want. But I think for an extra like $10 or so, you get little battery that you can put in there, and you get a charger cable. So they do have that choice. Like for example,
Well, no, but
when
I
I
mean,
play, yeah, but like as you mean internal, correct? Yeah.
yeah, I mean like an internal battery, not like a double A battery.
Oh,
If that
it's
makes sense,
not.
like a
It's like a. It's hard to explain, but it is like a little It's a battery pack basically. So
yeah, yeah.
it's not a double
Okay.
A battery, but you can charge it and everything, and you don't have to keep on reusing it. But still, it's
Hmm.
more like it doesn't come with it in a default. It just comes empty, and
Yeah.
it's basically up to
Well,
you
that's
to
well,
add extra
yeah.
$10 to it essentially.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like they want it to be like with the double A kind of perspective because that allows for like them to partner up with like those kind of companies that do produce those batteries and make them more relevant, right? Like, but it's not very useful from a consumer perspective, other than the fact that like in those one perspective, in those one situations where it's like, oh well, my battery's running out. Into I don't have another battery pack to replace. Like that's when double A batteries can come in handy, right? But
Hmm.
I kind of like the move away from those kind of like single use batteries or like mini rechargeable batteries, like in having rechargeable batteries that you can kind of use because they last longer and it's more better for the environment and stuff. And that's the thing, the PlayStation is kind of going for a more because I think even in that big conference that they had, like I don't know if you watched it, but it was like that guy who's just breaking down like everything about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
PlayStation.
I think his name's Mark
Um,
Cerny or whatever it is. He
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
he
because
just
that.
broke down everything.
Yeah,
Like it's crazy.
and then everyone was like, "Yeah, I'm very bored," because it's like this is like Mark Cerny's one of those guys where and I think they hyped it up to be like, "I'm going to show you the specs of the PlayStation 5," which is true, but it's like he is one of those very dry, like nerdy type guys where he'll just talk about it. It kind of reminds me of like John Carmack when he
Mhm.
talks about like game engines, because like I think if you
Mhm.
look at like he did a thing with Joe Rogan, and he is actually entertaining with Joe Rogan. But when he goes to the nerdy side of things, he can go really in depth into stuff that you're just like, I have no idea what
Yeah,
you said, but okay then. Like I think if you
yeah,
look at
like
his
it becomes too esoteric.
yeah, like if you, I think if you look, I remember watching his I think QuakeCon talk, in like 5 years ago, where I was talking about the rage engine, I think, and they were talking about like, oh yeah, the whole world is one big texture and how that works. Like it was like a 2 hour keynote, and I watched it. And I'm like, I have no idea how this is working, but okay. But like, yeah, he's one of those, and Mark Cerny's one of those guys as well, where he's just like, he'll just talk about technology, and then I think instead of like being like, okay, this means this, everyone's just like, okay,
I
words
think the
here,
thing
words
is,
there, like okay.
I think you did a really good job, like in that particular talk. When if you wanted to know something about the PlayStation, it got answered in that particular keynote or that speech that he gave, right? But one of the things they talked about is how they tried to make like conscious decisions to try and like lessen like energy use and like temperature expenditure by the PlayStation to make it more like environmentally friendly, because having an Xbox or having just a computer in general, like it consumes a lot of power relatively, unless you're using it in like a low power mode or something like that. So yeah, like it'll be interesting to see what consoles like get up to in the coming future, given all the delays and whatnot.
Well,
But
that's the thing.
one,
Even with that, I think recent news. What happened right now is I think I just read it on the news feed that probably came out about an hour ago. It just said that the PlayStation 5, I think consoles will be in, I think, short demand, like as in they'll have short stock. Not because of the what's going on in the world, but apparently its cost of manufacturing or something along those lines. I have to read the thing, but apparently that's the main reason why. So there'll be something what I kind of speculated, I think, like 2 weeks ago, where I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised with this console generation coming out as a launch that there'll be some sort of hardware like shortages, like back when like the PlayStation 3 and a few of those things were so hot items that like manufacturing wise they didn't have things would actually be sold out for once. I think going back to actually lining up or something like that.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's it. Like they do have to kind of start getting to the point where, they are trying to compete for people's like eyeballs, right? Like Xbox is coming out technically with a more powerful console per se, but then but they'll probably like take the brunt of the cost of the development. Like they usually do. Most consoles are developed at a loss until much later in their later in their life cycle, right? But speaking of things that were predicted a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how there might be a Resident Evil 4 remake in the work, and turns out there is one happening. So apparently this has been greenlit and it's been in development for a while. But because of all the news behind, Resident Evil 3 coming out, and I think because of the fact that that game hasn't been getting a lot of like stellar reviews from people, because apparently you can like finish it in like 5 or 6 hours, which is really short for like a full priced like in American dollars, like $60 game, right? It's very short, and I think a lot of people are very disappointed with it, especially compared to Resident Evil 2 remake. And so I think that they were like putting it out there like, oh, by the way, there's a Resident Evil 4 remake that's in the work, that's going to be coming out, but it will be coming out after Resident Evil 8. So that's something to keep in mind.
Well, that's a long time, and I think back to the Resident Evil 3 thing. I think it's like I was surprised and shocked that game out came so soon, because like the turnover time was literally a year. Like Resident Evil 2 came out like February, March last year. So to have that pretty much have a year cycle, you don't really see that, especially nowadays. Before there used to be games churned out every single year for a particular studio, but yeah, for something like Resident Evil to kind of be done in like for 1 year, it kind of makes sense that like 5 hours, maybe. And I've heard like I think there was a clock tower mission that they deleted, which would have been really cool if they got like cut, which would have been really cool if they at least left it in.
You see the problem is that like the game has like that short campaign, but then it has this tacked on multiplayer mode that like nobody really asked for. Like nobody wants to play this, I don't know, like I guess Left 4 Dead style game. I mean that kind of sounds cool, but it's like a Left 4 Dead style multiplayer game that has like these kind of what is it, loot box mechanic with like microtransactions in it, because that's how they're going to make money from that, right? But nobody really wanted that. They wanted more Resident Evil 3 in the game. So it kind of showed that, oh, well, kind of seems like they put their focus in somewhere else.
Well, yeah, they
And
can
that's
eat.
obviously.
That's the thing. They can add extra modes. That's the thing. But it doesn't have to be multiplayer. Like I think one thing that I think Resident Evil 4 started it as well is the mercenaries mode, where it's just waves and waves of zombies coming at you, and you just kind of
Yeah.
got to survive. Like I feel like,
Mhm.
and if they're gonna remake it, which obviously they are, I think the real question is like, yeah, they're gonna add these modes, but I'm hoping they also add all the, I guess, side things that you could get, because Resident Evil 4 had a lot of replayability. Like you play it again with better guns, and you replay it again with better, like even more better guns, and then you get to this point where I think you get the Mega Man Buster Arm, and then you can kill things like with one hit. So there's like really cool things. You get costumes, so I'm hoping they don't cut that through a paywall. I think that's my one thing of like, keep all the extra stuff in and maybe add some extra stuff on there on top of the remake. Now the real question on top of that, all of it is that, do people really need a Resident Evil 4 remake? Because as I mentioned before,
Oh
it,
yeah,
it it's been ported to everything. Like, and
yeah.
I haven't played in a while, but I'm assuming it holds up relatively well. I think all they would really do is just update the controls, in the sense of like Resident Evil 2's controls is pretty much taken from the Resident Evil 4 controls, just that now you can move slowly when you aim down the sights. So I'm assuming
Well,
it's going to be the same thing.
well, that's the thing, right? Like they're just essentially getting like the same engine that they made Resident Evil 2 out of, and then just porting various games using the said engine, like so to speak. Like that might be like a really simplistic view of what they're doing exactly, right? But I don't see why that's necessarily a bad thing. Is you give it a new paint job, you introduce like new creatures. You maybe even introduce like a new area, couple of areas, and kind of flip the script on like what was like originally expected. Like the same thing like happened in the Resident Evil 2 remake as well. Like not everything um, is exactly the same as the original game, but actually adds to what people remembered playing back then. And I think that's essentially it. Like, I'm pretty sure like the Resident Evil 4 actually has um a release on Switch, but then again, what doesn't these days,
Yeah,
right?
like I said, I
Uh,
think you can get it on phones. You can get it on like literally
I
every
think I
single
can. I think
device.
I have it on my TI-89 calculator.
Like it's just one of those games where it's just been ported for, because it is there. Like I think it's not even their best selling, because I think Resident Evil 6 was actually, which is actually really shocking. I think it's just because
Well,
it handled the hype from 5, and then 5 went to 6, and it was like, what the hell 6?
well, people didn't really like 5 that much, did they? That was
I
the one
liked
where
5.
set
I
in.
liked 5. I think there was the hardcore people where they're just like, okay, like Resident Evil 4 probably had a semi good mix of
Because
like horror and action, and then 5 was just like, you know what, fuck it, we'll give you all the action you
action.
want.
And then 6 was like even more action,
Yeah.
like I think that's the thing. And that's the thing, it's kind of good that the Resident Evil games are kind of going back to their roots, right? Like with Resident Evil 7. Because I think a lot of people really like that particular game. So, again, with 8 coming out means more good things. Good
Yeah,
to see
and
Capcom kind of.
I've heard rumors of 8 of it's like the protagonist from 7 comes back, and they're gonna be playing with they're gonna be playing with mechanics of like insanity, apparently, from this particular source slash user that leaked quote unquote things of like,
Oh,
it's
okay.
gonna be measuring like, yeah, your sanity like levels, and like if you're stressing out or not, and I
So
don't know
kind
how
of
that's.
like well, what's that really old game that everybody in
Everyone talks about Eternal Darkness on the GameCube, where it does some weird shit. Where it, like,
well,
trips out the screen and makes you think that, like, it's a very meta way to do things.
yeah, like I remember there was like a game. It's maybe it's called like Insomnia or something like that. It's like PewDiePie. Like I remember played it or
Oh,
something like that.
Amnesia.
Amnesia, The Dark Descent. Like that had kind of mechanics that like tested your like insanity and like so like it isn't just like being caught by these creatures. It's also trying to keep sane while also doing it. So maybe it's doing stuff like that because but yeah, I mean, again, anything that keeps like the horror genre fresh, right? Rather than just being, ooh, spooky jump scares or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, speaking of video games, so China banned Animal Crossing because there's been so Animal Crossing, it's just an innocent game where you just like collect, I don't know,
To be
like
honest, I think it's the most
turnips and
innocent game that you could possibly get. Like,
yeah. However, people have been using Animal Crossing as a means to protest against the Chinese Communist Party. So like putting out like banners such as like Free Hong Kong, and because you can also like draw faces and like I think like maybe import faces into the game as well. So there's like like the president's there and various other people that people are just kind of like mocking or making fun of, and like stuff like that. And so China has banned the game um, from distribution, because they basically have like their equivalent of like Amazon or whatever. That's where you could like get the game, but now it's no longer there and you can no longer purchase it. Um, and at the same time, they've even taken it to another level where I think literally yesterday, at the time of recording, they basically said that they're banning all online gaming and chatting with foreigners outside of like the Chinese Great Firewall. So, if you want to play a game with other people outside of China, not going to happen. And and to quote, I guess like this article, they literally say like the communist regime has noticed that there's a authority vacuum in online multiplayer games. It essentially means like they are unable to control what people are saying online on video games and stuff like that. So now they're trying to control opinions and speech and ideas that are distributed and memed on video games. Like nobody really like kind of goes hard out
Well, I
talking
feel like
political stuff in video
game
games, right?
game chat, and things like that has been basically the final frontier of a lot of this type of stuff. Even like our own type of governments, where like they're like, oh, there's too many bullying and things like that happening in like game chats, and we want to like
Mm.
get rid of that. Or like if you're bullying people or trolling people in games, we want to like ban you. And there's like a lot of things like that have happened. I think Rainbow Six has some sort of ban type of a banning system when you say certain things, or something like that. So like game companies have done certain things like that. The real question is just like it is like places like China and things like that doing that is just very it's obviously it's very them. But the
Well,
real
yeah,
question is,
I think.
can they even do it? Because like a lot of the
Oh yeah, they definitely can.
but but they've got like everything has internal clients, and they're just gonna like switch off the switch and be like, no, we can't even have like, for example, like they you'd say a lot of people from China do play a lot of games like PUBG and things like that. They're just gonna
Mm.
like pull the plug and be like, yeah, we can't play that, or like I don't
Well,
understand
no,
how
no,
that
no,
would
no,
work.
no. So you know how there's Chinese servers of PUBG,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you also have the option in a lot of games to play in different regions, right? Like, I play, for example, like a lot of Blizzard games, it gives you the option of, oh, do you want to play in the Americas? Do you want to play in Europe? Do you want to play in Asia, right? Um, they would probably just be like, well, yeah, if you want to play PUBG, PUBG, like they probably have, interact, that, I mean, China is very buddy buddy with Blizzard, for example. So they would probably make it so that you can't switch your client out to interact with non-Chinese servers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the solution would be. It wouldn't be that the whole game gets shut off, unless the gaming company completely is like, no, we're not going to listen to China, but then the whole game gets banned, right? And they want those China bucks, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
So
but then on top of that, if things leak out, I don't know how they would leak out, but if they leaked out like this game company applied with China's restriction rule, I feel like a lot of people maybe like in like Western world to be like, oh,
yeah, but
they'd hate that and maybe like get flack on it. But like for example, it I know
I,
that some of these things die out really quickly. For example, like
mm,
what happened with Blizzard, another example of
yeah, I
Blizzard.
was gonna point that
Yeah,
out.
like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
happened, and then it's kind of like died down. Like even though they have their own controversies, like I think it's talked about it before, where it's like the Warcraft 3 Reforged, which I was really excited for, they just completely botched it, and I'm really pissed off about.
Mm.
But like I think everyone's kind of forgotten almost about the game, and
No, I think the problem is because it was based on, is it before Warcraft 1, right? Like
no,
most people,
it's like Warcraft one,
Warcraft
two,
2.
and three, and it's like three's there. I think
Is it in the first movie?
oh, you mean the movie?
Yeah, the movie. That's
Oh,
what I
yeah,
mean.
the
Like,
movie's based off the technically the first Warcraft thing, but like
right. So,
The Warcraft 3 reforged the remake of the game
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
of
Well,
Warcraft 3 is essentially
I,
just like yeah they replaced the old thing to the new thing, so you can't even play the old version.
right.
That's a really annoying thing.
I meant more like, I'll just point out with like the movie. I think the movie did bad because it's based off like the least familiar like Warcraft game. Like there's like World of Warcraft, which is most known by people, and
Yeah.
then it's like Warcraft 3, then 2, and then 1, right? Like in that order probably. So they're based off a game where a game which people aren't familiar with. They'd probably had been better off just being like, oh hey, let's do the movie based on Warcraft 3, and then do like prequels, or maybe do references to the old games during those movies. I think if they did that, a lot more people would have been interested in watching Warcraft. And on top of that, I think like it kind of seemed like that was like they were really hedging their bets on that doing really well in China, right? And I'm not too sure if it did really well in China, but not enough to actually
Yeah,
make the movie
I think what the
consider.
news was, it did really well in China.
Yeah,
However, just like in general, that's not
it did
enough.
really bad. Yeah, makes
For
sense.
the movie to succeed. Because I think, because I remember the CGI being touted as a big thing, and it was, because like they're having
Mm.
these motions for the orcs to look really good. You know, I liked it, for example.
Mhm.
But like that's the thing. If you're a hardcore Warcraft fan, you'll like it. But it's like, I wish there was more like, like night elves and the undead and things like that would be really cool to kind of see, because I think having a story of like humans and orcs, it's very like base fantasy, I guess, for a lot of people,
Is
and it'd be
it?
really cool to
Is
have like extra elements to it.
See, I only care about seeing Arthurus turning into the Lich King, mate. I just want to see them adapt Warcraft 3. Yes, I could just play the game, but that involves me playing the game, which I
That
haven't done
involves
in
hundreds
ages.
of hours
And
playing
I've got a
World of
yeah, and
Warcraft.
I've got yeah, and I've got a lot of backlogs as it is to play video game wise. But speaking of movies doing well, overseas and online and stuff. I don't know if you've heard of a little movie called Trolls World Tour, but apparently it's the biggest digital. It's had the biggest digital debut ever. Originally, this film was supposed to come out both digitally and in cinemas, but because of the big crisis that's happening
The
around the
Big
world,
Sick.
global crisis, the big sick, the beer disease that's happening. They just went with a digital release, and it's apparently number one across like a lot of like major on-demand video platforms, like like Amazon, Chromecast, Comcast, sorry, Apple, Fandango, and it generated over 10 times more than the next largest traditional premium home release like movie. Now, what this kind of shows is, hey, maybe there is a avenue for people, or like moviegoers to watch movies, and for companies to release movies in a digital format rather than just a traditional go to the movies and watch it. And I was thinking about this, and maybe this might like switch up, like and might potentially put a big kind of hurdle in the movie industry at the moment. Because think about it, theaters are just like areas with giant seats and a giant screen where you watch movies in a social setting, but most of the time you are not. I know in America it's very common for people to like talk or like comment or yell out, like like I know friends who, and I've been to cinemas in like the northern, like America, right? People talk during movies. It's not the case here in Australia. People kind of are quiet and stuff, but it's not like you watch movies as like a social event, but you don't really interact with people socially. So it kind of makes sense that there might be like a desire and also like a distribution um, kind of benefit for all like Universal or Disney or whatever to just directly give consumers their movies and then not have to have the middleman of cinemas such as here in Australia it's like Hoyts and Village, in America like AMC, having them take that cut from having a movie premiere and just have that all directly go to people creating movies. Now, again, it might go down, like how much their profits are, because let's say like you and I watch a movie together, I can just go watch that movie at your place and pay like the one price versus us having to pay individual tickets at a movie. So maybe that might be something that has to be figured out, like how exactly are they going to be able to monetize like maybe big budget movies that are coming out, like we're having a lot of movies such as Wonder Woman and Black Widow, like they're all being pushed because they don't want to, I guess, have that I guess that smudge or that kind of designation of, oh, this is like a direct to DVD or direct to
Streaming
streaming
service.
movie, right? Because that makes it seem less prestigious, and maybe people might not value it as much. And I think that's a genuine fear that I think that is not irrational that these companies have. It makes complete sense that that's something that they're thinking, but at the same time, maybe there is something that they can take from something like Trolls World Tour doing really well. Again, at the same time, there's a lot of people staying at home now, including kids, so that might be a big motivation to why the film did well. But I think at the same time, let's say after everything kind of the world opens up again, one of the things I don't see happening straight away is people going to movies, because people will still be wary of catching things from other people, and sitting very close to each other. So I think there's going to be a big reduction in stuff like that. So maybe that might give a bit of a leeway for these movie like these movie companies to maybe just give it direct to people. But we'll just see how it. What do you think?
Well, I feel like that it's very interesting to see it, and like because Trolls. I'm assuming that the first one did alright to make a second one.
I think there's three movies. This is
Three.
yeah, yeah,
Jesus
yeah.
Christ. Okay then.
Because I think there's Trolls One, Trolls Two. I'll fact check it for you right now.
But still, like I'm because at the same time, kids movies it's such a weird thing because you never really know the take of a box office when it comes to kids movies. Sometimes they can do really well, sometimes they can do really bad. So for example, like Despicable Me, I think the original one came out of nowhere and then that made so much money, and then the second one did, and basically it was a franchise in and of itself, the Despicable thing. So Trolls have maybe one of those newer type franchises where it's going to make quite a bit of money. But yeah, and then on top of that, having the streaming service as well to at least be like to have the parents aware to be like, oh, let's watch Trolls online.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a learning curve for a lot of people. But if
Mhm.
parents can do that for their little kids, I'm assuming that could be very accessible for that parent to watch a film that they want to watch themselves online as well.
Yeah, and look, like with a lot of these movies, like I think Onwards, right? Last week or 2 weeks ago, and that particular movie, like, it didn't do so well in the cinemas because obviously people weren't going to the cinemas. So Disney kind of put it on their kind of Disney Plus service for people to watch, because that's like a means that you can now watch the film, as opposed to, I guess, having to keep it in a vault or just not making the profit out of it out of like spite. It's like, oh, if nobody's going to watch it in the movie, we're not sorry, in the cinemas, we're not going to distribute it, right? Like, this seems to be the most rational thing that you can do given the you know situation that's currently in place. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue to do well. It's just whether or not, like, they're able to whether it's able to transfer into other films, like superhero films. Are people going to watch Wonder Woman at home? Is that
Yeah,
going to be a
because
thing?
I think for some certain films need that spectacle, or they need like a good setup. Like, I don't know. I'm one of those very much purists of just like if someone watched like I don't know, like the whole meme a while ago was what was it, Dunkirk. Watching
Mm-hmm.
Dunkirk the way Nolan intended, and it was like in a tablet or on like on your phone. Like
Mm-hmm.
watching those types of films on that is a different experience than watching it like in a cinema, IMAX, or even just like at a good theater setup that you have at home. So I feel like there is differences, but when it comes to like
Mm-hmm.
something like a superhero thing, there is a lot of spectacle going on. And there's a lot of cool things that like for me, I'm one of those cinema purists that I do love having a cinema packed with people and experiencing the same thing that other people are experiencing in the same room. That's my whole thing. That's what I really, that's why I like going to opening days and things like that, because I just really like that experience that you can't capture anywhere else when you're in a place with like a bunch of fans. Um, and I feel like they might experiment with it because like obviously Disney right now they're still pulling back Mulan
Oh yeah.
as well as what do you call it, Black Widow. So those are their two big tentpole releases, as well as Eternals and things like that. But that got pushed back. So the real question
Mm-hmm.
is, what they're doing with it is like at some point Disney will be either being like, okay, we're gonna show our card and just be like, bam, let's put it on the streaming service and see it. Like I think they hedged so much with Mulan with the Chinese market. I don't know how that's going to work now, but I don't know if they're going to release Black Widow directly to Disney Plus. But you never know, because from what we've heard with rumors with Disney in general, since all the parks are closed and that is a significant money maker for them as well, they
Hmm.
kind of have nothing to give to people aside from home releases, and
Yeah,
or
and
release those
especially.
big releases on their digital platform. That's the only two options they have.
And then also I think like with a lot of the big executives and CEOs are taking like uh cuts in their salaries and stuff in order to pay other people. So yeah, they're hemorrhaging. I think like a lot of countries, sorry, well countries as well, but companies are also hemorrhaging money trying to kind of keep things afloat, given the situation. But yeah, speaking of which, Netflix is Netflix stocks are worth more than Disney stocks, and they're currently hitting an all-time high, which makes a lot of sense because everybody's at home, and like what better to do than just like sit down and watch whatever latest movie that's coming out or latest TV show that's coming out, to keep yourself occupied and uh not have it so that every day feels the same. Like what's that movie where every um
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day, right? Break it up and watching shows. We're kind of lucky. We've got like Netflix, we've got Stan. There's in America, there's heaps more stuff there. So it makes sense that Netflix in particular has the brand recognition, has the brand name, and everybody can kind of watch it. And at the same time, there's all those Netflix parties. I don't know if you've used that particular
Mm-hmm.
extension yet, but I've really liked it, and it's a good way to kind of have that kind of cinematic experience with people without necessarily having people around, which is kind of what you want at
Yeah,
the moment.
pretty much.
Um, and oh yeah, onto more kind of serious news. So Ezra Miller was videoed choking some female fan of his.
Question mark.
Really? Question mark? Yeah, it's really weird. Like, yeah, this happened like like a week, like more than a week ago now. But like, I think like at the time when it happened, like there wasn't, I didn't want to kind of jump the gun in regards to like what was going on with the situation with Ezra Miller, because there was like rumors about, oh, she knew, like it was like a playful thing, or he knew her or something like that. Yeah, apparently no, he didn't know who this woman was. And yeah, apparently with fan culture and stuff, like a lot of celebrities kind of deal with a lot of different kinds of fans, but then there's like these kind of fans who try to like heckle or try and like be very like in your face with celebrities. When you get too familiar with people because you obviously see them on social media, so you try and like uh, get too close and familiar. And I think that's what's happened here, where this woman's just kind of like talking like all the shit to Ezra Miller as a joke, but then Ezra Miller had this overreaction where he just chokes her and takes her down to the ground. And it's just absolutely ridiculous.
I feel like
Um,
it felt so staged because I'm like, no one actually does
right?
that. Like,
It kind of,
clearly.
it kind of, it like even the whole thing looked really strange. And it might just be because like they were probably both drunk, so they all kind of like fell slowly together and stuff like that. So it's just really weird, like what the situation is. I don't know if they're doing any kind of like investigation of that going forward. But it's obviously not a good look for Ezra Miller, and it's obviously not a good look for DC. So I wouldn't be too surprised if like DC is going to be trying to like move away from all that kind of stuff that's happening. Like for example, like on Screen Geek, they said like internally that like WB are reportedly preparing to like move on without Ezra Miller.
Because I think their initial
Which
reports, like, I don't know, like a year ago, a year and a half ago, he was like begging to keep the Flash role and trying to be like, I want to make all these things work, yada yada yada. And they probably were on a fence with him. But now they're
yeah,
probably
yeah.
just like, okay, this is a good enough reason to kind of kick him out. And then everyone's like, yeah, you should get Grant Gustin, but I still like feel like that would be a lot.
Nah, they
That'd
won't
be
do
even
it.
more confusing because it's like you've already got something is already established in their own Flash universe on
Yeah,
top of
yeah.
anything else.
That's not gonna happen. They'll just need to get someone else. That's it. It's no big deal. But I think the main thing is like I'm kind of not too sad about it because I kind of didn't like his version of the Flash. But obviously, like if he is kind of like innocent in everything, which I don't know what it is. Like it just seems pretty damning. I wouldn't want to lose their job over like necessarily a mistake or like something that was a joke. But again, it's it just looks really bad. And I'm not gonna wipe any tears. Like meanwhile, like something like what is it? Amber Heard, right? I really like her as Mera. Like she's really good in the movie, but in real life, she's a fucking bitch.
Yeah,
So
I'm very conflicted as well because I'm like, okay, you played a relatively alright Mara, like
yeah,
I think
like
you've just got the look more than the and semi attitude, but
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
like that, yeah,
yeah,
like the acting or
yeah,
anything like
but
that. Like
like
yeah,
personally, I'm just like, oh, like nah, I want you to suffer in your life, like I want you to lose the role, but I wish you didn't stuff up, so like,
yeah, like well,
yeah,
that's the thing. Like for people who aren't aware, so like Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, they were married. Get like they're obviously like in the middle of like maybe a divorce or getting a divorce or they are divorced. But there was all these allegations that Johnny Depp was like domestically abusing Amber Heard, like hitting her, and there was all these images that she posted like on social media of like bruises and stuff like that. But recently, this would have been like maybe 2 years ago or something like that when all these allegations came out, and a lot of like news media like we're talking about, oh, Johnny Depp is like an asshole, like like but he's like a woman beater and all that kind of
he
stuff.
pretty much
He
lost
lost
the Jack Sparrow role because of
yeah
it.
he lost the Jack Sparrow role. He like more or less was like going to lose the Harry Potter role, right? In the what's those movies like not Harry
Fantastic
Potter,
Beasts.
Fantastic Beasts, right? Because he's like the villain in the
Yes.
in the movie, yeah. So yeah, he's like the villain in the movie, uh and yeah, he was gonna potentially lose that as well, right? But I think like it's kind of iffy now because like it's one of those things where I don't think WB had a lot of like kind of faith in him either. Like WB, right? They make Harry Potter.
Yeah,
Or
one
am I?
yeah, Warner
Yeah,
Brothers. Yeah.
Warner Brothers. Yeah, yeah. Like yeah. So it's like they didn't have a lot of faith in him. So it's kind of awkward. It's kind of like if I was to accuse you of like killing someone, and I'm like I did like someone accused you of killing someone, and I didn't have your back and fired you, but then later on you tend to be innocent, and I'm like, oh, hey, you want to you want to come back and work with
It's like,
me,
hey,
man? It's
sorry,
like
I kicked you down when you're at your worst, but
yeah, yeah,
we can
exactly.
still get you back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think like, look, especially this is the problem with things like cancel culture, right? Like people make their decisions before they even before like people kind of throw you out to the court of public opinion as opposed to like taking you to proper court of law, right? And I think that's what happened to Johnny. But like because of all the stuff that came out with him, showing like like voice logs and like recordings of Amber Heard talking about how like oh like no like she never hit him, he just like punched him a little bit or something like that, and how no one would ever believe him if he ever went and like complained about being like a victim of like being like abused, right? And that's the kind of thing that it's kind of shining a light on, and I think a lot of people have kind of warmed up. But as you can see, like mainstream media, like yeah, they kind of reported on it, but they don't really like paint Amber Heard as a negative. It's like, oh well, we'll better wait till criminal investigations happen before we say what truly happened between these two, right? Like, well, this is the kind of disgusting facet of clickbait, journalism, yellow jacket journalism, yeah, whatever.
Just
But yeah,
basically the bad stuff.
yeah, yeah, and well, here's the thing. Like again, like I said, I kind of like that. Like Amber Heard kind of like kills the look of Mera. Like there's no, I don't think there's any denying that. It's just a shame because now like if they make an Aquaman 2, like are they just gonna get a new actress to play her, or are they just gonna remove her completely from any subsequent Aquaman films? If they do that, that's just such a shame because Mera's like a really good character and she's kind of unique in the whole Aquaman mythos. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, like I don't
yeah,
know.
I thought she was gonna be like the new Harley Quinn in the sense of like everyone's gonna like know who Mera is, everyone wants to cosplay her, and I think when Aquaman did come out, there was a lot of Meras, more than I've ever seen.
Mm.
But yeah, who knows now because like it's just about the staying power of the character.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's just a shame that yeah, stuff like that happens. Personal people sometimes stuff up things in different industries.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like with the comic book industry in particular, like we're coming to a point where we talked about before about like, oh, well, what's going to happen going forward with comics? Like, is it going to be the weekly releases and stuff like that. And at the moment, like, Marvel, DC have basically said like, hey, like, you guys can hold off on making comics at the moment. And I think that's the kind of, everybody's kind of put comics on pause, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing because that kind of allows me to catch up on a lot of comics. I've been kind of catching up on like Batman comics because that's something that like I like everything else I've been reading, but like now that everything's like has a slowdown, I'm like slowly kind of consuming all Batman comics and detective comics. Like that's what I've been doing like a lot of, and it's all very good. But the thing is, like, what's the state of comics now? One big thing that I was thinking about, and that, like, I've seen online, is that because the comic book industry is kind of dying like universally everywhere, a lot of comic books stores are like kind of closing down, and even those kind of stores are kind of more reliant on people, uh, you know, getting like pop culture stuff, like pops. But one good way that could get people to kind of be like all in and back in on comics again is if the big two, like DC and Marvel, do another kind of big crossover event. And there hasn't been one in a very, very long time. Like, I think like the last time they had some kind of big Marvel DC crossover event, it was called like I want to say it's like called like Tangent Comics or something like that. Essentially, like, there was like these two entities from both universes, like the Marvel and the DC universe, pit the um, heroes against each other, and then whichever heroes win, their universes survive while the other gets destroyed. Right? Classic. And one of the big things that kind
Very
of
Mortal Kombat like.
yeah, very Mortal Kombat, right? And one of the big things that happens, a separate kind of universe gets created where the like two heroes from each universe like fuse into one, and that's the hero. Like there was one for like there was like a Spider-Man Superman hybrid, and there was like and some of them were pretty creative. There was like a Wolverine, I think maybe like Batman hybrid. There was heaps of ones that are just like this, and they had some really unique storytelling that like really couldn't be done really in a modern day setting because Warner Brothers has like all the DC properties and Disney has all their Marvel, but they're all kind of keeping them close and not really allowing them to have that kind of crossover interaction because these big mega corporations now own them and they want a cut of that pie. Whereas before, when they weren't owned, like by these entities, they could kind of like cross over and do these kind of stuff more easily back then. But that could be a potential thing that might happen in the future to try and like revitalize people's interest in like reading comics. It'd be very interesting to see, whether they do that. Like places like comicbook.com and CBR, like they've been all kind of throwing that theory. They do that all the time where they throw out theories. Oh, this might be a good idea. Yeah, sure. But I think this could be a legitimate thing that they can do to try and revitalize people's interest in kind of going to like a physical store, but then also revitalizing comic book stories under a good, like, a vein and agreement.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
whether or
no,
not.
yeah, I completely agree. They need some sort of type of crossover. But yeah, I think on top of that is, since no one's making, I guess, new comics anymore, there's so much, because I think the model of comics possibly maybe change, that it's changing and it might have to change. I think because stuff like graphic novels and already already written stories, I think sell quite well. They always sell quite well.
Mhm.
For example, like what we always talk about Watchmen and everything that always sells well, but like I think a lot. I want to see graphic novel numbers and kind of complete 12-issue comic book runs. They generally sell quite well. So I feel like maybe the model of having a weekly to bi-weekly or even monthly comic book model is almost not sustainable. And maybe they do have to shift to a like having maybe like do what they do with mangas, where I think mangas are it's just like once a year, but it's like a thick book, and maybe that's a way to do it as
Well,
well. But but there's, because not only that, but there's so
I
much
mean,
stuff in comics that it's almost like
mm,
like I think even some of the stuff is like you can sell a lot of the old stock that they have in stores, and they would
mhm.
be okay. The thing is, they can't even go to those old stores.
Well, not right now, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, like, well, manga is like, technically created weekly as well, and that's the thing. Like, comics have literally like what you talk about, where it's like, yeah, like, they have like the collected, which is like the omnibus, right? Like, or like, like the story arc, that comes out, like, maybe like, a couple of months later after the original kind of sets of comics come out. It's just the problem is, like, people want to get like those kind of weekly releases that they usually get, which is the same as, manga. It just might be that the price point might have to change, or how much is offered has to change.
Mhm.
And
I've
to give a lot of creative, like, kind of leeway that, maybe a lot of manga has, because a lot of manga, like, not every single weekly issue of a manga is like 20 pages, right? And maybe if they are, like, there isn't like necessarily a whole lot going on. It really depends, like, depending on like what kind of series you're reading. So in the end, like, yeah, they'll have to change things up. But I don't know if, like, because the thing is, like, people who buy comics are people who, like, really are invested in like having that like physical comic, rather than like something that's like digital. I like reading comics digital and physical, so it's not really a big deal for me. But like, yeah, for people who are like hardcore and buy things in like weekly, which I don't necessarily buy things everything weekly. I just try and buy things like when I feel like reading them, really.
Mm.
Um,
But yeah,
yeah.
but as you like, yeah, even on top of that, because like when I went to Japan recently,
Mm,
and it just reminded me of the fact that like you can get manga like in convenience stores, like they have their like the Shonen Jump magazine that has all of it kind of in one kind of condensed book, and you can buy it at convenience stores nearly every single corner. But with comic books, and I remember it was kind of a thing in the '90s, where you go to some sort of, I don't know, supermarket
yeah,
thing, and
yeah.
they
There'll
would
be,
have
yeah,
comic
yeah.
books. But I think now, in the past like 20 plus years, I think it's basically been like you can only get them at comic book stores or just normal bookstores that have kind of normal bookstores have kind of expanded on it, but they haven't had
Mm,
like, oh yeah, you won't get the up-to-date issue, you'll just get like old runs or something like that. So I feel like things
yeah.
have changed where like the access or discovery of comic books is now purely based on entertainment in movies and TV, and that relates
Hmm.
into hopefully comic book sales, which I don't really see that much crossover. I don't think.
No, and here's the thing, right? Like, manga and anime, that's very like cemented in like Japanese culture. Like, most people, um, like, people read more manga than they do consume anime, right? And if anything, anime is more like a promotional tool for the manga, because that's where they make the big bucks, in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And so subsequently, like, will they be able to have like a similar model in something like that? I don't think we have like the kind of the zeitgeist really demands it. Like, people don't generally want to read comics, like, as an average person. So it really comes down to, can they make better quality comics that make it worth picking up, like that. Like, it's like when you play like a video game and it's like outside your regular genre. Like, I wouldn't play a racing game usually, like, unless it's like with friends. But like, maybe there's like that one racing game that's so good that even as somebody who's not a racing fan needs to pick it up and play it. I think they have to consider kind of upping their game in terms of like comic quality and making people wanting to come back to the genre. And I think do a crossover would probably do it, because who doesn't want to see Superman fight the Hulk, or Batman fight, I don't know, Iron Man. Let's just go with that. And who doesn't want to see, like, some kind of new fangled story that kind of gets everybody excited about comics. And I think that's a good way to do it. Maybe they might have like even the little guys come in. You can have like your Archie comics, and you can have like Boom comics and Valiant and stuff like that come in, and put in their characters and have like cameos and stuff like that. Some kind of big event that kind of gets everybody like involved and cooperating. And I'm sure there's something in the background happening now that they kind of don't have anything better to do than plan for how they're going to get out of the current state of things,
Mm-hmm.
as they are.
Think of it as a planning stage, a planning period. I guess you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like what
Yeah,
series can we do, or that
something new that we
maybe
can
they're in
do.
talks as well. Because as you mentioned, if Disney's going really bad, with their money wise and their own like Marvel, it can be like, and the Marvel division's probably scrambling around right now, and that's one of the losses they have. They're like,
Mm.
fine, like last minute effort, we'll do the crossover. And I wouldn't be surprised if the last crossover, as you mentioned before, was probably in the '90s where the '90s crash happened. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah,
if it measures around that time as well.
yeah. Well, I believe it was like roundabout time. But it could have been like a little bit later too. But yeah. But speaking of like kind of new ideas and new things. So Star Wars, we've obviously every time we talk about Star Wars, it's never really good. But the High Republic, it's kind of like the new kind of age that they're kind of exploring between the Old Republic and the New Republic, I guess. And in this era, Jedi's are everywhere and exploring stuff. And they introduced a new Jedi, called, it's like Avis Kiss or something, right? Avar Chris.
Ivara Chris, that sounds
Avar
very
Chris.
Star Warsy.
Right, yeah. They just put a word generator and come up with a name. And this character is described as being the brightest, most noble example of Jedihood. Except for the fact that like Yoda is like, I don't know, like 400 years old or something, and this whole period of the Jedi is only 200 years. So Yoda should be around. Shouldn't he be isn't he the most like smartest, bravest, like smartest Jedi of all time? But the thing is, the one thing that I see that this character seems to have a lot of similarities to, is that she's blonde. She's one of these characters that, so as I kind of describe it, Ava is the brightest, most noble example of Jedihood. She always sees the good in people and situations, never puts herself first. She is invigorated about life on the frontier and the challenges it brings, and is an inspiration for those who work with her. She's compassionate, not dogmatic, and always ready to sacrifice herself. Ava Chris is the best of the best. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for there to have faults. She kind of literally sounds like a Mary Sue.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and I think as we talked before, you want a
she,
character to have some sort of flaw, right? Like
yeah,
the only
you
flaw I
want
could see is someone's being insanely arrogant and no one likes her. That's probably the only
to,
thing that you can do.
yeah, and funnily enough, I think this character, literally is something that they're preparing to be played by none other than who's the chick who plays Captain Marvel?
Good old Brie Larson.
Brie Larson. I feel like she is being like this character is being groomed to be placed as Brie Larson's future Star Wars character, because Brie Larson has expressed interest in playing a Star Wars character. But obviously, I think because Star Wars is being shelved at the moment, um, for the most part, like from a movie perspective, and with High Republic kind of setting up like for all these potential news stories that they might explore, and maybe like this is going to be their attempt to try and throw something at a wall and see what sticks. But yeah, with the description, this character, like obviously these are all very like, you know, is it as much as I would like to give Marvel a bit of leeway and maybe be like, oh, you know what, I'll wait till it comes out and see how it does. Marvel shouldn't be trusted with any of these properties because they have been
Well,
doing a good job.
Marvel, DC. No, I mean like Disney with basically the Disney wing. You just can't
Yeah,
trust Disney
Disney.
in
Yeah,
general.
yeah. Sorry, I did. You see, they all kind of they all come together as one.
They're
So
all
I just see them as one.
let's be honest, they're all very similar. But yeah, like as you mentioned, like you can't really. Yeah, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but really they've struck nothing more than they've struck gold. For example, like there's no confidence for me to be like, okay, I'm okay with this. For example, if
Yeah.
someone's like, okay, like if someone's like, oh yeah, Steven Spielberg's gonna make X movie, I'll be like, yeah, it's probably gonna be a solid film. But it's like
Mhm.
with people who are still at the helm at Lucasfilm, for example, that have continuously been at Lucasfilm, it's like, okay, I'm expecting more of the same of what we've gotten, and I don't like what we've gotten. Aside from something like The Mandalorian or something like that, which is very kind of a one-off type of thing. So
Mhm.
with the new Star Wars front of what they're trying to do with the High Republic, I am very curious what they're going to try to do with this thing. Obviously, they're going to do a multi media thing where it's like TV, books, I would assume it works really well as a TV show if they go with their planning board of like having competing schools and like all this type of stuff.
Basically making it Harry Potter. Is that what you're telling me?
More or less, yes. But
Yeah.
like, and we still don't know what's going on with the Obi-Wan thing. Apparently, that got delayed,
That's on hold. Yeah.
yeah, as well. So like, I just do not have any confidence from these new ideas. Like, I hope it's good, but I want to see something more interesting than this, or at least give me better characters. I think that's what it is. It's just give me a character that's very relatable but has flaws and want me to
Yeah,
care
that
for
has
them.
flaws. It's actually ridiculous. Because I'll just talk about it really quickly because I've been reading a lot of Batman comics, and one of my like favorite characters, like that's like I never read much comics with her, but I always thought the character was cool, and now that I've kind of seen the New 52 Rebirth version of it, it's like like everything's being completely like justified in what I thought about this character. Her name's Cassandra Cain. I've mentioned her before on the podcast. Essentially, she's one of the kind of like Batman proteges. She's like pre New 52. She was a version of Batgirl, but in the current version, she's a character called Orphan. And yeah, she's essentially like the daughter of like two extremely powerful martial artists. One being Lady Shiva, the other being I think like Daniel Kane. And essentially like she was raised by her father to basically not like she wasn't taught to talk, um, and she was only taught how to read people's emotions through their body language. And her dad like killed people in front of her, like tortured them, blah blah blah, in order to kind of try and like put it in her mind like how to visibly read someone's actions before they even make them. And this has kind of led to her in the comics having really hard difficulties, like or hard difficulties, like difficulties in general, interacting with people because yeah, she can only kind of speak very. She doesn't speak very well. She only maybe talks like in one or two words or something. But like she has a lot of internal monologue. But then at the same time, she fights and she's like probably the best fighter. But then when she sees someone, I think for the first time, like doing ballet, it's like the first time she's seeing somebody move and it's not in the context of fighting. And so she's like in love with seeing like dancing
Mm.
and expressing that. You see, that's kind of a really good character. Again, a female character as well, who's developed in such a way that gives her a lot of cool action points, but then also gives her a lot of flaws that she has to kind of deal with. And there's a lot that you can really write. Like I'm currently reading the arc now where her mom's kind of coming into the forefront, Lady Shiva, who's like the number one martial artist in the DC universe. So I'm kind of just newly getting into that. But that's an example of like a good character. And yeah, it's such a shame that they can't capture like the same thing in any new characters. They just have to be perfect in every way. They're the best thing at everything they do, no flaws. It's not very interesting.
Yeah.
Just saying, not very
Yeah, you need that edge, and I think that's what a character is. You want, for example, the problem with something like Superman is that at some point Superman was so powerful, that everyone got bored of Superman because there was initial like Superman hype, and then people got bored of Superman, and that's why the more reinvention of Superman, he's weak, he gets his powers from the sun, etc., and then like the kind of reinterpretation of it, and I think that's why that's made him more like in a sense, like, okay, he's actually weak at some points, but it's just, even for another comic book character as well that's also a female, something like the Kick-Ass series, like Hit Girl, for example, Hit Girl is, a female trained in just fighting, and for example, the same thing as Cassandra Cain, martial arts, basically born to kill, and I think it's one of those. Then I think, but it touches on in the next series and things like that she doesn't have any good personal talking skills. Trying to learn to be like an actual living adult in the real world, and it's like it gives her something that she has to overcome. Essentially, you always need like the number one storytelling device. Pretty much number one is just like you need a plot type of thing of like you need someone to overcome something. If the character's already good at everything, then what's the point if they can't overcome anything? It's just like, and we could talk about it a little bit later on in maybe another episode of like what's happening with something like Westworld. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the main protagonists in
Mm-hmm.
Westworld are so overpowered that you have no worry in the world that they're gonna do whatever they do. So it's like I do not care at all about what happens to these characters or what they're striving towards because I know they can't be beaten. There's no secret thing that's gonna kill them.
Well, yeah, exactly. There isn't any drama like will they won't kind of things. Like yes, they will. They will be able to succeed. I was in a lot. And to be fair, it happens in a lot of media. Pointing out just Star Wars, but it happens in a lot of media, even like anime. There's like the latest episode of, what is it? My Hero Academia. I don't know if you're up to date.
Yes. I
On
watched the final
Okay,
episode of the season. So yeah.
yeah. So like in the latest episode, essentially they had what is it the New World #1 character? He's got like the fire ability. I forget his name.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I forget his name, but yeah,
but yeah,
fire
but
dude.
like yeah, fire dude. But like yeah, I was like in that episode, I was like, oh man, is he actually gonna die? Like in this fight, like this fight's like going on for ages and it's epic and like yeah, and like I kind of questioned like, oh, is he dead this episode? Like, is he gonna die? Like I didn't know. Like and genuinely, I was like, I was like on the edge of my seat, just thinking whether because again I don't read them right. Um, so I genuinely wasn't sure whether he was going to survive this particular fight, and I'm going to leave it up to like the audience to watch it and see what happens. But yeah, it's pretty compelling, and it's been a long time since anime's kind of or just an anime that I've watched has kind of done that. Like sometimes like oh the character's like 2 days away from retirement, so they're gonna they're gonna die or they're giving their like final speech about how they're gonna grow up on a farm or some shit like that, and oh sorry, like they're gonna retire on a or
And then you're just
retire in
like,
the
yeah, the Grim
country,
Reaper's
and
around
then
there somewhere, like.
yeah, and then yeah, exactly. And so it was really cool to see that in that particular show they kind of fixing like mix things up and keep you on your toes. I wish a lot more shows kind of did that, but we don't get a lot of that. But that being said, Ryan Johnson tried to do that with The Last Jedi and completely failed. And there was some additional news that also came out from some of the I guess Star Wars editors. So this is Marianne Brandon and Mary Jo Markey. So they helped with the editing of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and they had like they were giving their thoughts out on a recent podcast, right? And I think it was yeah. I'll read some of the quotes. So Brandon, she said, "I like parts of The Last Jedi. Yeah, The Last Jedi was a different take on the Star Wars saga. To Ryan's credit, he stuck to what he wanted to do. He wanted to deconstruct the film and open it up and go in a different direction, and that is the film he made. Um, I know it's controversial. Isn't that kind of good in a way? That's why I say I feel very much in hindsight, the trilogy, the last part of the trilogy, needs one vision. Meanwhile, Maki, like she didn't hold back. She was literally like, I couldn't agree more. It's very strange to have a to have the second film so consciously undo the story of the first one. That's what it felt like. And she continued by saying it took where the second film ended and just tried to tell a story. I didn't feel like it was consciously trying to. It didn't feel that way to me. I agree. I think that it's polarizing, and I think it was hard to know for a writer and for JJ what to do with it. So yeah, so that's the state of some of the editors of Star Wars and what they know about what was happening at the time of when The Last Jedi came out. And again, it just once again proved that Ryan Johnson just wanted to do whatever the hell he wanted to do. And yeah, it just I don't know, it just ruined it. It ruined it and it makes me very, very sad.
Yeah, it makes me very,
Thoughts?
very sad that, as well as like the foresight of like, you like, obviously I am for like a creative person's vision, but as I've mentioned many times before, if you're doing a franchise that has expected tropes, especially in like the middle of a planned trilogy, you clearly got to play with those particular things that you're kind of given. It's like, for example, if Nolan, for example, for the Dark Knight trilogy, was like, he did like he did Batman Begins, and then like for example the Joker was a very like campy Joker, very much like
Mhm.
the the 60s Batman, and we're just like, okay, that's a really weird tonal shift, and then the third one goes back to like a dark like tone, like it just doesn't work.
Mm.
And everyone would be like,
Yeah,
okay, that's a
well,
little bit
I
weird.
think I think the best way to describe it is like, let's say I write a rom-com, and then halfway through the book you come in and write a I guess like a murder slasher, and now I have to finish your book that like my book that you've now changed dramatically, right? It's like, well, shit, what do I do now?
Mm.
There's no way I can go back because now you've put this in, and I have to keep it, right? It's such a strange way to go about how you create cinema, and the fact that once again Star Wars didn't have a unifying vision, and that ultimately is what done it in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, again, I'm hoping Star Wars continues to do well. I haven't watched the new Clone Wars season, but I'm probably gonna watch it maybe like once more episodes are out or something, and just kind of binge watch all that. Might as well, right?
Yeah,
We've got all the time in the world these days,
more or less.
um, more or less. But yeah, I guess we'll start off with some of the stuff we have watched
Mm-hmm.
so far. And you've recently uh, watched The Tiger King, which is a documentary about a bunch of, I guess, tiger zookeepers and zookeepers in general, right? In America, and the kind of antics that they get up to. So this is like a documentary that's on Netflix. It's kind of all the rage. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I enjoyed the documentary. First of all, I like because like okay, I saw the hype. I'm like, okay, fine, because like I feel like Netflix has a lot of like they have like the market on documentaries. I feel like without Netflix, a lot of people
Mhm.
don't care as much for documentaries, but ever since stuff like makings of a murder and things like that, I think it's kind of popularized documentaries, and I think like at least I can applaud Netflix for that. But
Yeah.
yeah, Tiger King. Um, I enjoyed the story that it told in general. Because I think the main story you can kind of split it in between maybe 2/3 characters. So
Mhm.
you got Joey Exotic, who's like the main face of the documentary, who's quote unquote the Tiger King, and how he treats his tigers as well as his personal life. He's a very eccentric person. He has that kind of like I guess aura/vibe about him where it's like okay you're fun to be around. He's kind of got that thing going on. And then you've got good old Carol Baskins, which is also very much meme because basically Joy talks about her all the time. They're very much competing. I guess zookeepers or exotic zookeepers where Joey, for example, um he's talking about, oh yeah, like it's more of an entertainment value and things like that. And but he really hates Carol because she puts on this persona as someone who's like, I care very much more for these
Mhm.
tigers than you do,
Oh yeah.
but come to my park instead. And it's kind of like a feud between those two in a sense of like um you know entertainment for the park,
Well,
money.
isn't it kind of like Carol and her kind of hate for like the other two? Like Joey's obviously
Oh
involved.
yeah, and
Joey's
then
obviously
yeah, and then
involved, but it's like
I think that
him and
yeah,
the other guy, right?
yeah, the third guy is I forgot his Bhagavan. I don't know. He's a
Oh,
very
he's got an Indian name. Now the thing is that his name is literally God in Hindi.
mhm.
So that you can kind of get like what kind of vibe this guy gives, right?
Yeah, he's like one
He
of those like
actually,
new wave hippie white guys.
yeah, yeah.
But
Um, I,
yeah.
by the way, just as a side note, I've only watched the first episode, and man, Carol seems so unlikable. Not only because of just like this kind of air of pretentiousness that she has, but yeah, like she is. It's like she talks about how like, oh well, like she gives all her tigers all this space and stuff like that. But I'm fairly certain, and this is probably going to happen as I'm watching the show, that like her kind of um her kind of park and her kind of tactics and the stuff she does isn't all too different from what the other two kind of engage in.
Mm.
And also the fact that she's supported by Peter, who are notorious for killing millions of animals every year, and including kidnapping uh, people's pets. And using that as a means to justify killing them too. There's a lot of instances of Peter being involved in stuff like that. So yeah, again, like anybody, it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, they're sponsored by the devil. I wonder who's the bad guy is.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think the thing that the documentary actually does quite well is show that, well, there isn't necessarily like a good, like none of these people are good. They all seem like cartoon characters, something that's like fictional, right? But it's real.
Yeah,
And
I think that I think that's the good entertainment value because like no way these people are actually real people like like for
yeah,
example I think Joe's husband the John guy I'm like
mm,
he just looks like okay there's no way this guy's real but you know
he is.
yeah
Yeah,
he is real even like someone like you know Joe is such a colorful character. Like even one of the episodes later down the track, he talks about you know he wanted to run for president in 2016, and then wanted to run for mayor after that as well. So he's got that kind of vibe where it's like I can kind of do everything. So it's like and yeah, I think that's what makes this documentary quite entertaining. It's just the people who are in it are very interesting people. As mentioned before, I feel like the documentary does a good job of showing that like it's not. I would say everyone in this documentary, aside from like maybe one or two people, are like actually semi bad people or like this kind of very scummy in how they do their tactics. You know,
and the things that they do, like in general.
yeah. For example, like there's a lot of things where like you know, for example, you know, Joe he live streams. He has all these like kind of guns, and he does some threats to Carol Baskins, but instead of just doing it just on a live stream, he like sent to like you know
So like
snakes.
snakes, right?
Yeah,
Damn. Like, I mean, that shit's fucking funny. Like, it's absolutely like, it's obviously a really bad thing to do, but it's kind of hilarious that this dude actually sent this woman snake.
yeah, and
Um, and
it's so weird.
and it kind of calls to question like, how is like the American Postal Service not really like recognizing that they have like animals in like envelopes, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't look. I'm not a mailman, so I don't know how that works. Like, maybe it's far more common or normal than most people think it is. But yeah, it's just really weird that it just kind of it like gets past any kind of security to actually come to her mailbox. And the snakes also being alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is crazy in that sense, but that's the thing. It gets more and more crazier because there's things of like you know I'd say about halfway through the whole thing we talk about Jeff Lowe. He comes in and he's kind of like this random middleman business guy because Joe's having a little bit of bad luck in his financial thing, so he kind of comes in as like a third party trying to be like, well now I kind of control the park almost. So then you know Joe feels very betrayed. So there's a lot of like that stuff going on. There's a lot of backstabbing going on as well. Because it also breeds a lot of paranoia. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it is very tragic in a way because like a lot of these people where they come from and where they go to, it is kind of sad. Like I don't think it's really that big of a spoiler to say like Joe is currently in jail.
Yeah. That's in the first episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like he like that, and then basically like the last two episodes about kind of his case and how I don't know. You could say he's kind of set up, but in essence, it's more like he you know like I would assume so like for example sending snakes to someone is like probably a fence to go to jail or you would so assume so assume but there's all these things where it's kind of like he was probably going to go to jail but the way it's kind of framed is just everyone's just like
Well,
you know what let's just let's give all the things
well,
on
well,
top of him to get into jail
well,
you know.
to be fair, like the basis of the show is about like whether he was behind the murder of Carol Baskin's husband, correct? Is it Baskin's
Yeah.
husband?
Well, I think that's one part of it because the Carol Baskins because there is an episode about Carol Baskins and her husband and how she went missing and how Carol herself isn't a saint. She's one of those people where you know like there's things where like her husband just disappeared and it was like okay did the tiger eat it? Joe thinks so, but there's also things on top of that where like
Right,
you know,
right.
it interviews her you know the family being like yeah Carol's a weird person or like you know
So,
she.
so given that you've watched the show, I guess
Mhm.
my two questions are, do you think Joe is like innocent and that he should kind of get a pardon? And two, did Carol Baskins kill her husband?
Number one with the Carol Baskins, 100%. She probably definitely killed her husband.
I love how it's like 100%. Like everybody thinks she did it. Like it's kind of funny. Like there's only like been one person that I saw on Twitter that like kind of famous was like complaining about like how everybody doesn't believe her. This is like sexist or whatever. It's like every single other person in the universe like thinks she killed her husband, but don't tell me why. But yeah, that's really interesting. And what about for the first question about Joe Exotic? Do you think he should get a pardon?
Um, that's thing. I think yes, but in the sense of like, I don't think he meant any harm. In a sense, like I feel like I think there's a lot of things going on. Like I think he's very much one of those types of guys like Alex Jones, where like there's a persona of him, and then there's like the actual person. I think Joey
Yeah,
Exotic
yeah,
is
sure.
like is actually him being like very like, as his name's Joey Exotic. He's just trying to be like outlandish, very crazy out there, but
Mm-hmm.
people take that as like face value of like, nah, we're gonna get you for doing this. Now, certain
Yeah,
things
I
like
mean,
like sending snakes, yeah, okay, that's probably crossing
well,
the
I mean, I'm
line.
pretty sure he's also said stuff like he said it in the very first episode, like, oh, like if they try to take these tigers away from me, it's gonna be like, like a
Like
Tarabasco or
it
something.
was Waker.
Wake it's gonna be
Wait,
like Waco, which is essentially like, this. I think like when the government tried to get a warrant into I think it was like a church or something, and it kind of led
it was
into
like a
like a big
cult, yeah.
gun, a cult, and it led into like a big gunfight, right? Like where like people died, and
Mm.
so that's kind of like the implication is like he's gonna go, he's gonna shoot people if they try to illegally come into his place and like take stuff. So yeah, I think like again, like this is a kind of like American kind of mentality. They've got like amendment and their First Amendment and stuff like that. They're very like fixed around it. So I'm not surprised that the like like that kind of mentality can manifest in something like people saying something so like egregious, like, oh well, I'm willing to take it to like Waco, you
Yeah,
know.
and I think that's what it is, because like I think the last two episodes are kind of about his case, and I'm like, okay, it makes kind of sense that he might have done something crazy like this because his life was spiraling down at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But my whole thing is like, okay, but like then I think one of the people that were talking that was saying something that kind of made no sense, where it's like, okay, he paid this much money, but it would be costing way more for a certain thing else to happen. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know. That kind of makes more sense. But yeah, I don't know. Either way, it's one of those things where it's like the crime wasn't committed, so it's kind of like the thought of doing
Oh,
certain things.
so he was like arrested for conspiracy, was it?
Pretty much, but
Yeah.
the thing is, like, what you find out later in the episode, that a lot of people do betray him, and instead of just having that case, they're just like, you know what, we're gonna get you on all the rest of these charges as well on top of this charge, to kind of make
Okay.
everything stick. And I think that's why in the end you kind of feel like I guess in a sense semi bad for him, because it's like, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna get every single bad thing that you did on top of this particular case, just so we can get you in jail,
I
even
also,
more.
as a side note, I'd like to also point out, this, while is presented as a documentary, is technically like one of those kind of, oh, like we're gonna present these facts, but they have like an agenda to technically push, right? Like they're trying to show that, well, yeah, like the chips are stacked against Joe Exotic or Joey Exotic or whatever.
Hmm.
I think there's going to be a lot more things that are coming out, like given that there is a big interest in watching this documentary. I think TMZ is actually releasing a special about like the Tiger King, and there's all this other kind of stuff that are coming out. So I think it'd be interesting to see what other kind of perspectives and what other kind of new information will come out that hasn't been put into this show. And I think Netflix is doing like an additional thing. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see going forward what additional stuff is coming out. I'm slowly making my way through it. Like again, like I'm not a big like documentary watcher or someone who watches like, because this is almost like documentary slash reality TV. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it does have
Um,
that. It does have that like kind of take to it. I think it's just because they're colorful personalities.
yeah, yeah,
Where
and
you're
I
just
think
like,
like
okay, I
usually,
really want to know more about what's going on with you.
yeah, and usually I wouldn't be interested in something like that, but like when I get the appeal. Like they just seem like such, like there's a difference between watching something like this and watching something like an actual kind of quote unquote reality TV show like Keeping Up with the Kardashians or something, right? Like these are just like those are just like celebrities that you follow. Like if anything, everybody's sick of celebrities now with quarantine and seeing all the complaints that they're doing. Like people care about seeing like crazy wild shit that seem like fiction, but it's stranger than fiction.
Mm.
That's the kind of that's the I think that's probably the best way to you'd think would be to describe Tiger King, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And either way, I was thoroughly entertained through the rest of it. Yeah, and it presents a lot of different sides of things, and it does delve into a lot of things of just not only Joey Exotic but Carol Baskins, as well as I guess the tiger trade. In having like, are we allowed to have these exotic animals? Not in the wild, and then have them in these like little small areas to all these type of things of like breeding them as well, because as we're talking about the I think the other guy, the guy with the Indian name for God, he basically has built kind of like this almost like harem, like
Harem, yeah, like
somewhere
a
in the
sex cult.
country where he is like, oh yeah, you can take care of these tigers, but I'll give you a boob job, and you can maybe have sex with me because you're one of my star girls and things like that, and you can't, like, you can leave anytime you want, but you know it's
Yeah, so it's a sex cult.
yeah, more or less, and
But
that's the thing. And that's why I'm saying that this documentary portrays pretty much every single main person is pretty much a bad person in the sense of like, or it just shows their true nature of like, okay, I probably wouldn't want to hang around with you, but I feel like a lot of people are more attached to Joe, not only because of the documentary side of things, but I think like he's probably like, he's a little bit out there, but he's like one of your friends who's a little bit out there, but like in the end, like if you like got him down to heart, you'd be like, okay, like if you told him to be serious, he'd be serious, type of thing. So I feel like
mhm.
that's kind of like the line that he kind of gets towards. So that's why, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Tiger King, and I think pretty much like yeah, you should watch it, especially if definitely if you're not into documentaries. I think, as you were talking about before, I think it's a pretty good entry point for, I guess, documentaries, because it doesn't have the
Yeah,
very
yeah,
dryness to it.
I think yeah, because it keeps you entertained. I think it's like one of those things, like I mentioned, like if documentaries aren't your thing, you should watch this. Like this is definitely worth it. But yeah, again, I'll probably give a review, like
Mm-hmm.
consume more of it. You've also been watching Dispatches from Elsewhere.
Yes.
Tell me more about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I talked about it before. I think it had 3 episodes. And now pretty much it's the full season's nearly over. I think it's got 2 or 3 more episodes left. So there's kind of like a more up to date kind of review on it. And I think I don't get the bad reviews that it does get. I think I thoroughly do enjoy this show. Um,
Well, can you give a reminder to me, because I don't
mhm.
remember exactly what this this show is about.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, so it's about a bunch of individuals who feel like there's something missing in their life. Like they're stuck with their dead end job, or they don't have any friends, or no one accepts them for who they are, and these people come together through this kind of real life game. So think of it kind of like an escape room, but instead of it being in a room, it's like everywhere around you, everywhere you go, and basically it's done by these masterminds behind the scenes who are essentially they're playing this game with people, texting them, be at this park at this time, and they get these clues, and then these characters have to reveal the clues in person, so it's like a real life treasure hunt. And these people, it follows them as a personal journey as well. For example, one of the characters is trans, the other character is just in a dead job, one of the other characters is just obsessed with everything and needs to win, and one of the other main characters as well is an old lady who wants to get active again, I guess, in the real world. So it has these kind of broken individuals who don't feel home in themselves, and it's kind of them working together, building friendships together, and to solve these clues, and just I guess understanding more about life, and their purpose in life. So I think that's kind of the general main thing with this. And I think I enjoy the character, I guess, dynamics of it. I think they work really well, and I've kind of grown kind of attached to these characters. Like, I do want to see them in more things, if this does get a second season. But yeah, and I think in the first early few episodes that it kind of has this thing of like, is this a game, or is it had this meta thing of, is this a game, or is there more to this game than we initially think of? And essentially in one of the later episodes they find out it is just a game, quote unquote. um but obviously I think there's more mystery behind it, because there's a bit, I think 2 episodes ago, where it's revealed that they're all actors. There's a lot of people who are just actors. So the people that they try to follow, of like, they're the people committing crimes, or the whole story that they bought is all fake. And now they're at a point of like this disillusionment of this thing that they were obsessed with, of the game, the narrative that someone built, that they truly believed is just, the mystery's over, it's been solved. But now the characters are at this point of just being like, are they disillusioned? Is this real, or is this actually fake? Like, even if they've been told it. And I think that's a very interesting concept. And that's why I now, just as a kind of short review, I think a lot of people should watch this, just because it's just very interesting. The way it phrases everything. And
Funnily, sorry, just as a side note, it kind of sounds really familiar to like, to some. I don't know what it is. My friend was telling me about this kind of experience that you can kind of pay for, which sounds very, very similar to this. Like, where you pay like $100 or whatever it may be, and they kind of take you through this kind of experience where you kind of like, she was telling me how she went to a bar, and then like, they told her, oh, wait here, you'll get a drink and you can drink that, and yeah, like, you'll know what to do next when it happens. And then she was telling me how like she was talking to someone at the bar, and then they gave her a card, and the card was to tell her like where to go next. So all these people that she was just suddenly interacting with were all actors that were experienced, like, in this particular narrative that was happening. And like, she went to like a building, and all this like scary shit was happening, like all these people like like horror people almost. And it was just supposed to kind of keep you on your toes and stuff. So it sounds pretty similar to like these kind of things, but maybe it's taken to like that this other, like this next level. Obviously like in the framework of, oh, is there something, as you said, like, is there like a bigger narrative, something happening in the background that's, these characters are actually trying to discover, and it's not all just like fake, is it real?
Yeah, it is quite interesting, because I was doing some research on kind of like the idea of this concept and where it kind of came from, and it came from like I think this is based the TV show is based off a book that was about I think one of the very first, I guess, experiences of this kind of happening. I think it was like in San Francisco, where they just put flyers out being like, yeah, if you want something interesting to happen in your life, go to this address or something like that. So it's like one of those things where it's like, the I guess real life games, but you don't know who's acting and who's not really acting. That's a very interesting concept, and it's like, and then seeing that as a TV show as well, of these people not knowing if it's real or fake as well, it just adds an extra layer to it. So yeah, I feel like that's a really interesting concept as well, especially being the whole show frames certain people as maybe like villains, or they're scheming up to something, and then like at one episode point they're just like, oh, we're all actors, and they're just chilling out, and it's just like the main character is having this really big like, okay, what the hell is going on? Is this actually real? Is this actually fake? I have no idea. But there's still like 2 or 3 episodes left. And the other episode does end on a cliffhanger, so who knows? It's one of those things. But yeah, I do enjoy the show, and I think yeah, it's just one of those I'd say hidden gems, because I don't know anyone's talking about this show.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's Dispatches from Elsewhere. And another show that I've been watching is an Apple original TV show called Home Before Dark. And this just follows a family that moved to one of the guys' like old town that he used to live in, and it follows this little girl, the daughter of the guy's old town that he's staying at, and basically she's just a detective. She's more or less Nancy Drew, and she's just trying to solve these, I guess, this unsolved cold case about kids being kidnapped, and the more you find out, pretty much in the second episode, that the father, who moves back to the old town, is in semi-relation to this crime that happened, where some kids get kidnapped, and everyone in the town hates his family.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because of what happened to these court cases about saying if someone's guilty, not guilty, etc., etc., of kidnapping the kids. So when they move to town, everyone's very hostile to them, and it's kind of this journey between the little girl's name Hildy and her dad, kind of being outcasts in the town, but kind of almost kind of working together to help each other out. But and then you have Hildy with she makes friends, and it's kind of like this almost like semi Stranger Things type of thing where they try to solve this mystery together. I wouldn't say it doesn't have the same vibe as Stranger Things. I think Stranger Things has a very like more kid friendly vibe, more like, I don't know, family friendly type of adventure. But I think Home Before Dark, I think it's much more more depressing in a way, and it takes itself a little bit more seriously, in the way it does things, as well as on top of that, it's not as the characters aren't as colorful as something like in Stranger Things. But still, I think I think it's a relatively good show. I've watched about 6 episodes, and I enjoy my time with it. It hooks you in with I guess the kind of mystery that kind of slowly unfolds. Obviously, you do have to have some suspension of disbelief with the show, because there's a lot of things that this, I think, like 10-11-year-old kid does that like I would expect no one could ever do. Like, she talks to a police officer and gets like inside scoops for what's happening inside crime scenes, which I'm like, I don't think that would ever happen. But yeah, stuff like that. But I still enjoy the show. And yeah, I think this is probably maybe the only Apple TV show that I've enjoyed. From the
Wow. Has there been a lot? There's like that one where with blind people, there was that one.
Yeah, the C one with Jason Momoa. I haven't seen that one yet, but yeah, I watched like Dickinson. That was pretty bad. For All Mankind, it's just about what if the space race went on and now we had women in there. I've heard the morning show could be okay. But yeah, I don't know. Apple TV, I think this is maybe their only like kind of good one, where it's kind of like maybe it's probably gonna last maybe 1 season or 2 seasons of just like a town and there's a mystery. I kind of like those shows. Kind of like I think a few years ago there was one show called Sharp Objects, and obviously there's Big Little Lies as well, where it kind of has that same kind of vibe. Obviously there's a mystery, it's a town, try to solve it. So that's kind of like my review of Home Before Dark. It's not as bad as the other Apple TV shows. That's something. Yeah, and I got one final review as well, which is The Hunt, the very controversial movie The Hunt, which is the way it framed itself in the original trailer was it's just basically a bunch of bourgeoisie
liberals.
Liberals.
Yeah, liberal. Just to clarify, I guess, like, in America, liberal refers to people who are left leaning, whereas like in Australia, like liberals refer to being economically liberal, is like our right wing party. But yeah, like I guess, like, to kind of just put it frankly, like what, like a bunch of I guess right wing, like redneck people get like kidnapped by like lefty rich people and get hunted. I think that's like the basis of the movie, if I'm not mistaken.
More or less, yeah. And but I think that's kind of the basis of the thing, and it's kind of like the movie opens quite strange, I guess, because it opens just with a plane of these bourgeoisie liberals being like, they're in this like first class thing, they're acting like almost like what you would say is the stereotypical rich people, but they're acting in themselves, so it kind of opens up that way. And I think in the first 25 minutes or so, it opens in a way where it's like, okay, you think that you've established like who your main characters are and what's kind of happening on. And I don't think it's really a spoiler to say, but like in the first 20 minutes, but essentially, everyone dies except for one person. Which so it kind of throws a red herring at you, where it's like, oh yeah, you think all these people are going to be working together and helping each other out and have this talking together, but it doesn't. It just has this one character who just kind of comes in and just like, yeah, I'm the main character, which I found is very odd, because like I kept on coming through the movie. I'm like, okay, like more and more people are keep on dying. You can't just, like, this movie is still going on. Like I thought that was quite weird. But yeah, it really is just one person trying to take over the rest.
But so essentially she's trying to kind of survive by, I guess, the hunter becoming the hunted, kind of.
More or less. And I guess there's a lot of inner themes of just like, I feel like the controversy is just like it's hunting one segment of people, which is true. However, I think the movie does a little bit of back and forth, but it doesn't really do it too much in a way to have kind of 100% of a stance. For example, there's a lot of kind of jokes that do poke up about like certain things. For example, like cancel culture. I think cancel culture, is the main target actually of this film. Because
Okay.
I think the whole point of this is, and you don't really find out, and maybe until 40 minutes on, but I think it's a good thing kind of thing. The main person who started this hunt got cancelled cultured themselves, and
They got cancelled.
they got
You
cancelled, and
mean?
they got cancelled, and they were also a liberal. So they're just like, what the hell?
Okay.
So I feel like it's kind of like revenge almost of what majority, I guess, of what happens with this cancel culture. So it's almost like the cancel culture targets anyone.
Mhm.
So it kind of does. At least it kind of shines a light on like, hey, cancel culture is pretty stupid. At least I at least enjoy that. It kind of shines a light on that. But there's a lot of different stuff where it almost like it confirms things. For example, there's one character that you meet later on. He's like, and then they somehow meet up with these random refugees on a train, and then the guy's like, I've seen these conspiracy theories before where they're crisis actors. And then, for example, majority, you can see like they arrive somewhere and they're all getting checked by police or whatever, and essentially the majority, like literally all of them are real people, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, this guy who pretends to be an immigrant, for example, is actually a crisis actor. So it actually confirms his theory. So I feel like it's very odd in the way it frames it, where it's like, okay, like you're trying to frame this guy as a weird conspiracy theorist nut, but he's actually proven true at certain
Mhm.
points. So I feel like it's almost kind of like this thing where it doesn't necessarily know what 100% wants to say. I think it's trying to play the field
Well,
quite
well,
evenly in a sense, but it doesn't do it in such a way where it's like this is all stupid. I guess like,
mhm.
and I think on top of that, you've got the whole process of like, and it doesn't really touch on it. It's like, can you like, are you allowed to actually kidnap people and kill them? I think I think that
Is that actually a question it tries to ask?
no, but that's the thing.
Oh.
You kind of think so, because I think the main characters, or I guess like the liberal people that get hunted down one by one, they
Mm.
don't have any, I guess, semi remorse, or there's no really talking point of like, hey, like we don't deserve to be killed because of X opinion. They don't go,
Uh-huh.
they don't say that, or they don't
Okay.
have that's not the message, which I find is very weird, because it's like, shouldn't that be the main message, that like essentially no one deserves to be killed for their I guess reasons, or personal opinions. But that's why I found it very weird. And there's a little bit in the end that's kind of like a maybe slap in the face of what's going on. I don't know if it's like, it's one of those things that maybe keeps it in the gray area, but still, I think like the movie is in general kind of very like, it's a once and done type of film. I do like
Mhm.
these types of genre type films, but there's so much better films out there. For example, a film like Your Next does a better option, or even a movie that came out last year called Ready or Not um, does a far better and superior job of just a subject of just a person needs to survive and start killing people. That's basic,
Mhm.
yeah, and that
Now,
those films do it way better than The Hunt.
now, do you know who wrote this film?
I do not.
Okay. It begins with D and ends with David Lindelof.
Oh yeah, yeah. Everyone's non-favorite Damon Lindelof,
Ugh.
Mr.
Yeah. So
Prometheus Watchmen guy.
yeah, yeah. So uh, I'm not like hearing that there's like quote unquote good ideas, but then execution is bad seems literally right off Lindelof's like alley, right? Like he just has these ideas. Some of them are good, some a lot of them are bad, but then none of them really have. They're very surface level, and they don't really do much to kind of explore whatever concept that he's trying to explore. They're all very much like, oh, hey, look, symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Here, look at this thing. It means a thing. But like again, I think the thing is, it's kind of tough when you do like kind of because again, they're doing like a political topic, right? So this film like tries to be political, but it tries to play it tries to play the field and not take a side, so to speak. It kind of, from what I understand from other people who I know who told me about the film, it tries to like mock both sides of like the political spectrum, like these, as you said, like these kind of like rich lefty people, and like I guess like I guess redneck conservative people. Like I'm not too sure. I don't know what the other conservative characters are in the film, but like like one thing that somebody was telling me about was like one of these like these rich folks. They like take the like the magazine out from a gun and thinks like, oh hey, like now she can't shoot me or something. But like there's like a bullet loaded in the actual gun. So it's like supposed to mock the idea of like, okay, people who like people typically people who are left wing in America typically don't like own guns, or they are less likely to own guns or have ever fired. And so it's supposed to show that, okay, yeah, like these people who don't know anything about guns, they have poor gun management skills, and that's what's ended up making them look stupid in this scene, right?
Mm.
Again, this is like again, it's not as complicated as I'm making it. It's very much like, okay, this is what it's a reference to, and aha, that's pretty funny,
Yeah,
right?
as you mentioned before, and as I've mentioned, it is very surface level, and I don't think it doesn't delve too deep in like what it is. I think
Commentary, yeah,
I
yeah,
think this film is very it in a sense is very schlocky. It's just like it's just to see people get killed more or less. Even if it's just
hmm
no matter what political persuasion it is, it doesn't really have that much of a message. Or in a sense, like if like the action is shot quite well at sometimes, and it is quite like I guess gory. It does have a lot of kind of like those type of gory shots, but in the end, it's as I mentioned before, it is one of those very forgettable ones. And if it had a different topic slash subject matter of just people hunting for other people, I think this movie would have just been lost throughout time. Because like, aside from the whole political thing, if this was any other subject, I'm pretty sure it would just be like it's just an average film. And it doesn't do,
hmm
and that's the thing. It's like you could replace it from one subject to another subject, and the base film wouldn't change. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is like a lot of it is base level, as you mentioned before, um, and just how it frames everything. And as I mentioned before, in the end, there is a little bit that kind of gives you kind of a semi kick in the face almost of like this whole premise, but still, it's one of those things where it's like okay, yeah, whatever. Like
Yeah, I think I'm aware of particularly,
mhm.
and I kind of thought it was a bit of a too.
Yeah, it's
Um,
pretty much like a cop out almost, where it's like it's yeah, you just don't want certain
yeah,
things to happen.
yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who does want to watch it, but like yeah, it's basically a cop out. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm not sure if I'll watch it just because again, it's Lindelof and everything he makes is a disappointment.
Yeah, pretty much. And
And
then I'm writing here. I'm also seeing the co-writers is Damon Lindelof and Nick Cruz, or Kurz,
okay,
and
I
that
don't
guy
know.
also wrote Watchmen as well. Or he was the producer of
Uh,
Watchmen. So those two are pretty much buddy buddy. So
that guy is called Nick Kurz.
Kurz, Cuse. So I'm like, okay, these guys basically together. Yeah,
Okay,
and
all I'm gonna say is don't say that word too fast. That's all. Now
uh huh.
I'm gonna move on to my uh thing that I've watched which was Mortal Kombat Legends: Scorpion's Revenge. Now I wasn't aware that there was gonna be like a Scorpion, like some kind of Mortal Kombat movie coming out.
Well, aside
Um,
from the live action one, that's the only one I knew of. Like the
Yeah.
live action
But
one
like
that's
this
gonna come out
this
at some
movie
point.
like came out of like nowhere, and I was like, oh, I gotta watch this. Like funnily enough, I haven't actually played any of the new Mortal Kombat games, but I love like the universe is very like interesting. There's a lot of like colorful characters, and they all kind of have unique things. Like you have Scorpion and Sub Zeros, and stuff like that. And a lot of these characters kind of come into this movie. And from my understanding, the movie is more or less like a adaptation of like the first game. It's essentially about a couple of warriors are coming together in order to fight at the Mortal Kombat tournament, which dictates whether the different realms can like rule over the other realms. There are like six realms or something. Earth realm being like our realm, and then there's Shao Kahn who rules over the I think the and he wants to kind of invade Earthland and all the other lands. And you can only do that if you win, I think, 10 Mortal Kombat tournaments. Um, and so this whole movie is about how Sonya Blade, I think Johnny Cage, and Liu Kang, they all kind of come out of from their own kind of individual areas, and they all kind of go into this tournament alongside Raiden, who's like the lightning god, and they're all trying to get into this tournament. But at the beginning of the movie, it's about like the origin of Scorpion and how he becomes involved in everything. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's really cool.
Well, that's the
Again,
thing. I'm assuming like because I know like Mortal Kombat, I guess history, I guess because I grew up with Mortal Kombat, and I guess the characters about like I guess like doesn't because I'm assuming it establishes the whole point of like the warring clans between like Sub Zero's clan and Scorpion's clan, of
mhm.
I guess of being ninjas.
Yeah,
And then basically him, I think, doesn't he make a deal with like a demon or devil? That's why he
yeah,
gets,
yeah, yeah.
that's why he has that,
Shinra.
yeah, that's why he has like the skull and everything, and all that type of
Hmm.
stuff. So I'm assuming
Yeah, and
it's
so
more or less his origin story.
yeah, yeah, essentially, like it's called Scorpion's Revenge, but the thing is, like the whole movie, like I think like there is a lot of focus on like the other characters as well, right? Like I think the other main characters, it's probably Johnny Cage who kind of comes into it thinking, oh well, hey, is this a movie? Like, oh man, that looks that guy dying looks fake. Like he's just saying all these comments. He's probably like the best character in the movie because he's obviously like this really aloof, dumb guy, like as he is in the video games too. But I think the movie does a really good job at kind of capturing all that. The animation's like good, like it's not like awful, but I think it does a good job. I think at times like you can kind of tell that like yeah, like it can kind of feel really like I guess like molasses here and there. But I think like every time it comes to like a fight scene, the fight scenes are really cool and they kind of get the job done. You've got like again like Sonya Blade, like Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, all their characters like sound really cool. The voice acting's really done really great. There's all these like classic kind of moves that they do from the game as well. Like you eventually hear like Scorpion say "Get over here" and all that kind of stuff. Like all the lines are there and all the I'm sure like again I don't remember like every single fatality um from these games, but I'm sure in the actual animation they have done like the ways they've killed some of the characters or some of the people that they fight are probably based off some of the fatalities that they do from the games as well. So if you're if you're like a really hardcore Mortal Kombat person, you'll get like a lot of kick out of this. Like how they have like in the newer games like the X-ray vision, like every time you
Hmm.
do like they have a lot of that as well. So every time like they do some like really kind of serious damage or something, or they have like a knife going through someone's skull, they'll like do the X-ray vision and show like the sword going through the brain. I think that was done like with the newer, like the first game like that came out in like 2016, I want to say,
No, I think
or
this was
earlier,
like a
2015,
no. I think the X-ray thing started to
earlier.
come in like the 360 one, Mortal Kombat 9, which I think was like yeah for
Yeah.
2015, yeah,
Oh, nine. Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. So
or
maybe
something
I'm
like that. It was a
maybe.
while ago,
Oh,
but
oh
yeah.
20, yeah, 2011. That's the one. That's the one that I meant. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
like,
that yeah
yeah,
that one
because it's
started
like,
the X-ray one, and I think yeah it's really cool that at least they adapted that because I thought that is quite cool, and it's I guess now more like Mortal Kombat just made like because it was originally just all about fatalities, but now they've got like the X-ray vision stuff, which is also quite cool and quite
mm.
gory.
The thing that I also kind of find pretty crazy is like, in order to get like, all those X-ray and all those like kind of you know designs for how these people like look when they're like all decapitated and stuff like that. Like the designers for the game actually like looked up pictures of like people from like car crashes and stuff, like in order to like um properly animate like how someone would look like when they have certain things like done, like cut off, or like their arms cut off or whatever it may be. So I kind of found it crazy that like NetherRealm like to that kind of detail just to get like that kind of like authenticity that I guess we as consumers don't have to kind of suffer through. So it's pretty cool. I really should play Mortal Kombat like 9 through 11 because at least just like the campaign because I really do love all that shit. But yeah, Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge. It's really cool. I think it kind of goes through like the story of Mortal Kombat is like uh, pretty interesting. Again, like I think this is kind of like the soft introduction to it, and I think like later, like in this film, they introduce like Jack's like pre-cyber arms, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like showing, oh, like they're gonna probably have like Jack's with cyber arms like in the next film, which is definitely going to happen.
Well, with the title, it very much suggests like, okay, they're gonna have some sort of series of like focusing on particular characters and kind of having a main story per character. And I'm wondering like since this pretty much film came out of nowhere, I am very curious of like, how long did it take to animate / get it made, and like how many of these are going to be, because I don't know if they're going to be if it's profitable or kind of where it's kind of released or whatever.
Well, look,
but like I find it very interesting, and like it'd be really cool to see more as anime, because I think there was a Mortal Kombat animated TV show back in the 90s, I think. So it'd be really cool to bring something like that back.
Yeah, there was a movie that from the night. Oh yeah, no, actually. Yeah, actually, wait, hold on. Let me.
Well, there's the first two Mortal Kombat movies, but I swear to God, there was an animated TV show.
Yeah. I just looked at it. It says called Mortal Kombat Defender. So yeah, that was like 13 episodes. Interesting. It doesn't have a lot of. It has pretty. I guess like every episode is like dedicated to like someone getting their ass beat and fatalitied in some particular way. But yeah, I would recommend it if you like Mortal Kombat. It's worth it. Like again, like it's not like you're not gonna get like 10 out of 10 animation with it, but I think like the stuff that they do with it is pretty decent. And the fight scenes are really cool. And yeah, if you want to see people like beat the shit out of each other and like get stabbed with like knives and shit, this is the
in animated form.
In animated form, yes. In animated form, yes. So yeah, I'd recommend Legend, Scorpion's Revenge.
All right, yeah, I'm definitely gonna check it out, because yeah, big Mortal Kombat fan, and yeah, I just like the universe, and like yeah, as you mentioned before, the characters just really bring it out. Like Scorpion's really cool. Obviously, he's like kind of the main star of it, but people like Jax, Sonya Blade,
Sub-Zero, Reptile.
So, yeah, they're all they're just so cool, and they just all have their own, like even Kano, the Australian guy. I'm like, oh, this is all kind of like, they're all just kind of very cool.
Yeah, look, I personally like how like originally like they had the character be like all the ninja characters were just like generic like palette swaps of like the same character, but then eventually over time they gave them all their own like unique features, but they still like pay homage to what they originally looked like, because they do have I think Reptile in this movie too. But he doesn't just look like Scorpion, right? He's like a lizard dude who's wearing like ninja armor. But it's cool because obviously it's like a reference to the original game. And how I think like he's called Reptile, but he just looks like a dude. It's only when he does like the fatality or he pulls off his mask in the end and it's like a lizard face, right? So yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, again, watch the movie, really dope.
Yeah, all right, cool. I will do that, hopefully. But yeah, that's going to be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies, where we stream. So until next time, maybe Henry Cavill is going to be in some sort of Mortal Kombat movie. That'd be pretty dope. But until next time, see you guys.
Catch ya.